So with all those questions in mind and the ones posed by Natalie, I'm delighted to say that your keynote speaker of this session is Dr. Wayne Visser, who will address these issues. Now, hopefully I've got your surname correctly. I've heard all sorts of different pronunciations. I think you know that I'm talking about you, which is good. So when I say your name, you'll know to come up. But Wayne has got an enormous amount of experience in the industry. He's a strategy analyst, an established entrepreneur, a sustainability advisor, a CSR expert, a futurist, and if that wasn't enough, a prolific writer, the author of 26 books, no less. Wayne is also the director of the think tank and media company Kaleidoscope Futures, which he combines with being a professor of integrated value and holder of the chair in sustainable transformation at Antwerp Management School. And there was a very important piece that BASF talked about earlier on value. So I think that's something that we might pick up on as well as a transition. But if that wasn't enough as well, he's the fellow of the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And he describes himself as a professional idea monger and storyteller. And he sees his mission as helping to bring about transformative thinking and action in business and society. So Wayne is here to share his vision on the value that sustainability and sustainable development goals in particular represents for business and society as a whole, and the link that he sees between this and the crucial issue of talent and skills. So please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Wayne Visser. Or Visser even.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have been reliably informed that in this session of wonderful women, I'm not the token male. And that we have other forms of diversity. So let's get started. Why are we facing this issue? Well, I think that there are three crises that business in general is facing, and the first is a crisis of engagement. 85% of employees around the world say that they're not fully engaged in their work. In the United States, that's 14% who say that their personal values and their corporate values are not aligned. And as we know from the research, lower employee engagement leads to higher absenteeism, it leads to more errors, accidents and defects, lower productivity, lower profitability, job growth, and 65% lower share price over time. And this reminds me of some research that I came across when I was doing my PhD that identified a group of people called the Tireds. And it stands for the 30-something independent, radical, educated dropouts. Dropouts because they leave big companies. And why do they leave? Well, 66% of those surveyed in the UK between the ages of 18 and 35 said that they were unhappy in their work. And that rose to 83% in the ages of 30 to 35. So when they were just about to hit their stride of their careers, the companies couldn't retain them. They were dropping out because they said really that what they wanted was deeper reward for the effort that they're putting in. They wanted something that was meaningful, that they felt they were making a real difference in society. And so this is a real challenge for companies, for big companies especially. There is a second crisis, I think, and that's a crisis of inclusion, which indeed speaks directly to this session. When we look at the report of the World Economic Forum, the Global Gender Gap, we see that in the economic participation element of that, the gap is still 42% between men and women, which is just crazy and completely unacceptable. And in fact, over the last 10 years, the wage gap between men and women has been getting wider. It hasn't been closing, and in fact, if we continue with current trends, it would take us 217 years to close that gap. Not good enough. And sad to say, if you look at your own sector here, it's right at the bottom. So something really needs to change. The third crisis, which has already been alluded to, I think is a crisis of trust and a crisis of perception. You may have seen this image from National Geographic, and for those of you who've stared at it for a little while, you'll notice that this is not an iceberg, this is a plastic bag. And so the move against plastics has really shot up the agenda in the last 2 years. And, it's become a public phenomenon. This is me actually sitting in Bruges, where there's the large whale that's made by Greenpeace from ocean plastics. And so this issue is really starting to inform how people think about this industry. Well, we've done a survey, and there is some good news as well. We looked at companies specifically in Belgium and their engagement with sustainability. And the good news is that sustainability is a source of ideas from employees. It's a way to really engage them. Also, it's one of the main benefits when you engage in sustainability. You find that you have employees who are more engaged, they have higher pride, they see the employer themselves also as more attractive. So this is a powerful driver if we do it right. There's a big caveat, because if you do it wrong, it has the opposite effect. And I'll come back to that. Also, when you look at the social side of sustainability, remember sustainability is not just the environmental or the economic issues, then it's all about talent, diversity, and inclusion, whether it's attention to well-being, employability, diversity in backgrounds, support for good causes with a social goal, labor market inclusion, and so on. So this is squarely in the agenda of sustainability and on the agenda of companies. I said there's a caveat, and this research to me is one of the most stunning findings I've ever come across. Because what they did is they looked in Europe at current and future leaders. So once again, we are looking at the incumbent leaders and the younger generation, the future leaders. And what they found is that current and future leaders agree that business should have a social purpose in addition to an economic purpose. But here's the surprise. Current leaders think they're already delivering that social purpose. 9 out of 10 of them. Only 2 out of 10 future leaders believe that's true. There's a huge generation expectations gap here. In the eyes of the younger leaders, business is not delivering social value. And that's a huge problem for recruitment, for retention, for engagement with those employees. And when you look at those younger employees, what is important to them? Well, in fact, they're saying that it has to be about more than the money. When you ask them what the measures of success are today, well, current and future leaders agree it's profitability, it's shareholder value. But future leaders believe that it should be, in the future, more about measuring innovation, societal and environmental impact, and talent development. And when you ask them what are the barriers to joining purpose and profit, one of the biggest barriers they see, management attitudes. What are they talking about? The incumbent leadership again, who believes they're doing a great job. So we really need to question. When they ask these future leaders, what are the rewards, what are the benefits of engaging on sustainability, they say indeed that it means that they feel more engaged in the workplace, they increase trust, there's more relevance to the next generation and more innovation. And when you say, what should we do as leaders then? 2 things come out, education and changing mindsets. Well, if we're going to change mindsets, what kind of leaders do we need to grow then? What are the kind of leaders that will engage effectively on societal challenges? And what we find from research I've been involved in with the University of Cambridge is that there are 7 characteristics of leaders that are really making an impact in society. And there are things like systemic understanding, seeing how things are connected. That if you're tackling a water issue, it's linked to a health issue. And if you're tackling an employee issue, it's linked to motivation. So really seeing the interconnectedness of our global system. Emotional intelligence, or EQ. Empathy, being able to consult with stakeholders and actually listen to them, not simply ignore them. Being driven by values, having a compelling vision. Being inclusive, linking to our theme today. Being innovative, and having a long-term perspective. This is the one, to be honest, that kills most current leaders. I mean, how can you be long-term in your thinking when you're being chased for quarterly results. And so you get companies like Unilever and leaders like Paul Polman saying they refuse to report quarterly now because it incentivizes completely the wrong behavior. Now, that issue of mindsets comes up again, because what we find then is that the leaders that have more knowledge on sustainability are also the leaders that are more likely to find the business case, the economic and financial benefits. It's a little bit of a paradox, but we need to therefore focus on leadership development, on education around these issues, and then we're more likely to see the benefits. Well, we're doing a few things just to illustrate at Antwerp Management School. One of the things we believe is you have to then integrate it into all kinds of education and training. And so we do that through collaboration. We have a partnership for sustainability, which is between the university, ourselves as the management school, the Port of Antwerp, the City of Antwerp, the Province of Antwerp, and BASF. They also have supported BASF and the Port, as well as Randstad, my chair. And then we engage with the students, and we embed it. We have 9 full-time master's programs. They don't get a separate program on sustainability. It's embedded. In fact, on the very first day they arrive, they get a full day on sustainability as the future leaders of our companies. We have things like the SDG Ambassadors campaign, where they can join up and volunteer, and half of them volunteer to do voluntary projects during their one-year masters. Yeah, they've created now this year 25 projects, all completely spontaneously, because they want to make an impact. Some of them get the benefit of meeting, for example, the Belgian Queen, and other people like the author of Donut Economics. We also think then that you have to engage collaboratively with companies, and so we set up corporate leaders groups on the circular economy, and the well-being economy just launched last week. So that we actually have to come up with actions collaboratively. Now, when we really look at some of the things that are coming out of the chemical industry, we have to say that it is inspiring if we can really tune into what's going on. This could be a really exciting field for those future leaders. This is one example, Q-Pinch in the Port of Antwerp zone, that is all about capturing waste heat, essentially closing the loop on energy and on carbon, which is a wider program for the Port of Antwerp to make the whole zone of 900 companies circular in nature. Umicore, the biggest processor of precious metals in the world, taking back from your phones, from your laptops, from industrial processes. And their problem at the moment is too little supply, because we all leave our gadgets in our drawers when we upgrade. Yeah, so we need to also take care of supply and demand. We get a company like Covestro, used to be part of Bayer, now looking at the idea of carbon productivity or being climate positive, making products that are absorbing carbon so that they become part of the climate solution, not part of the problem. And then indeed a company like BASF, which for many years has had the Verbund approach, which is really creating integrated sites where the waste from one industry in the chemicals sector is automatically a feedstock into another business on that site. You heard from them this morning, and what's behind some of their thinking on creating value for society is this idea of tracking their supply chain and really being honest about which parts of their supply chain are part of the solution and which parts are part of the problem. And they categorize those into accelerator products, performer, transitioner, and challenged products. So really being honest with ourselves about whether we are bringing the solutions and what proportion of our products are really doing that. Now, of course, when we talk about sustainability, we have to link to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is, again, a very exciting prospect for the young people, because we're talking about really changing our impact by 2030, really addressing these huge challenges that we face. And it opens up a $12 trillion market. We estimate that there'll be 28 million jobs created by the SDGs by 2050. And of course, we know as well from the research that when a company is genuinely sustainable, we have all of these human capital benefits, improved employee morale by 55%, better than others, greater loyalty by 38%, increased productivity by 16%, reduced turnover by 25 to 50%. Pride is higher, annual quitting is lower, replacement costs are lower. So real business benefits if companies can get this right. But what I see a lot today is companies getting it wrong. And this is one of the sectors where I think it's still struggling. Because there is a new phenomenon. You've probably heard of greenwashing, the idea of appearing to be more environmentally friendly than you are, especially through public relations. Well, I talk about rainbow washing now, because now we're using the Sustainable Development Goals to appear suddenly very responsible and very sustainable. And what companies are typically doing is cherry-picking them and saying, okay, this relates nicely to our business. The fact that there's 17 of them and that we're ignoring 15 of them, well, that's for somebody else to take care of. So we have to be really, really careful. This only works if you adopt the approach that I call integrated value. If you start to see that you've got to tackle the resilience economy, you've got to lower risk in society at the same time that you bring the smart technologies to connect us, at the same time that you reduce inequality and disparity and exclusion in the economy, at the same time that you move to a circular economy and take care of the well-being of employees and people in society. It's these integrated solutions that really bring the innovation which is so exciting. And so I think what we have before us really is a challenge of collaboration, because we found out we can't do this on our own. And I was born in Zimbabwe, I grew up in South Africa, so a little African proverb for you. You've probably heard it before, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In sustainability, we have no choice but to go together. We're in an integrated global economy that is still completely fossil fuel dependent, which is a problem. You don't get to 80 or 90% less carbon by tweaking and by just marginal improvements at the edges, a little bit of efficiency here and a little bit of improvement there. So we have to go together. And we have to realize that everything is indeed connected. And one of the quotes I like that really encapsulates this is a quote by Chico Mendes. He was an activist, actually, in the rubber plantations of Brazil. And he was such an activist, he was so challenging that he got murdered for his troubles. But what he said is, at first, I thought I was fighting to save rubber trees. Then I thought I was fighting to save the Amazon rainforest. Now I realize I'm fighting for humanity. And that's the interconnectedness of the whole thing. And maybe it's unusual at a conference like this where we're talking about numbers and business and finance and growth and all the things that I've heard in the last day or so. But actually it comes down to values. This is serious enough that it is about whether we're going to survive in a high quality of life world beyond 2050. It really is that serious. So if we do it right, I think we may be able to look back and be a little bit like Mahatma Gandhi in the chemical industry. There's a dream. Saying first they ignored us, then they laughed at us, then they fought us, and then we won. Thank you.